Yeah, whatever that sound is, it's going to make it in the recording. It's okay now? Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Rama Rama Rama. Okay. So 2 more to go out of 6. 6 Goswamis, right? 6 Goswamis. You're familiar with the 6 Goswamis, right? Oh, very good. Who's your favorite? Haridas Thakur. He's not one of the 6, but that's good.
Yesterday I got in the temple Namacharya book.
Namacharya.
Somebody has written his life.
Okay. So, thus far we've discussed Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, yesterday evening Jiva Goswami, and this evening is Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Most known about Gopal Bhatta Goswami was his deity, Radharaman. But he had many other wonderful characteristics, which we'll hear about as we go along. Here's a nice verse that he composed. O Sri Radhe, you are the queen of the heart of Govinda. Please engage me in your service. In the celebrated book that we've been hearing so much about, Gonadesh Dipika, describing those persons in Krishna, in Gaura Lila, who are they in Krishna Lila. So far, all the Goswamis have been gopis or in Manjari Bhav, and so also with Gopal Bhatta. Ananga Manjari. Who is Ananga Manjari? Ananga Manjari? Ananga Manjari? Huh? Radharani's sister. Radharani's sister. Oh, Sri Radhe, you're the queen of the heart of Govinda. Please engage me in your service. And also known as Guna Manjari, different than Ananga Manjari, another of the Manjaris. And you might be interested to know, among his most celebrated disciples was Srinivas Acharya, and Srinivas Acharya wrote a poem or a prayer to his guru, addressing his guru as Guna Manjari, Gopal Bhatta. So this painting is a painting you see in the lower right corner. The artist is Vrinda. She's a teenage Hare Krishna girl who grew up in the Hare Krishna movement, sitting during class, coloring a coloring book like many kids do. But as she grew, she became a little more proficient in art, and this is one of her pieces of art. I received it from Prahlad Nrsinga because it was just put up on her Facebook, and he knows Facebook. So there you see she's holding, Guna Manjari is holding Radharaman. Very beautiful painting. And it's meant to illustrate the following prayer of Srinivas Acharya to his guru. O Guna Manjari, the embodiment of divine love, please listen to my prayer. As I ponder upon your countless qualities, my mind simply becomes enchanted by you. Seeing me as a distressed soul, please constantly bestow your mercy upon me. Due to your own magnanimous nature, please fulfill my desire. Besides you who, like the water-laden cloud of the monsoon, will quench my thirst. You are undoubtedly the hope for the hopeless. In my heart, I'm completely convinced about that. I beg you to kindly look upon me with your tender eyes shining with sympathy. Signed, Srinivas Acharya. Very beautiful. And I find it very interesting that he's addressing his spiritual master Gopal Bhatta according to his spiritual identity in Krishna Lila. Gopal Bhatta was born in Shirangam, and the presiding deity in Srirangam, as we all know, is Shiranganath. There's a nice photo, not just a painting, but a photo of the deity, very well lit, with Shri and Bhu in the front, along with the Utsav form of Shiranganath. And here's a close-up of Shiranganath in his reclining position on the bed of Anantashesh. So that's where he was born. He was the son of the chief priest of Srirangam. Of course, there's many, many, many priests. The chief priest is a great honor and position and title. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited Sri Ranga Kshetra when Gopal was just 7, or somewhere between 7 and 10 years old. And upon the invitation of his father, you know the history, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, seeing the deity, was dancing and dancing and dancing in ecstatic love of God. No one in Sri Rangam had seen anything like that before. And Venkata Bhatta came, invited him when he had calmed down to come have lunch, and invited him to stay in his home for the 4 months of the rainy season. Now, some of us had the good fortune in our South Indian yatra to actually visit the house where Lord Chaitanya stayed. We were taken there by our guide, and apparently there was a prior arrangement because some number in line of descendancy from Venkata Bhatta was and still is Parashara Bhatta. And it's in a section of Sri Rangakshetra that's a little to the side. It has its own name of where Brahmanas would reside in, like a community. And it's a very simple house. One of those houses that has really thick, 3-foot thick walls, so that in the heat of the summer it's still cool inside, etc. And when we went inside, it was just walls and floor. There was hardly any furniture. Went around to the side, and there was a table that had all kinds of small deities on the table. And I asked Parashara, where did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stay? And he went like this. He said the whole house was his. And because of the elevated nature of Venkata Bhatta and the devotional nature of the young sannyasi who was staying in their home, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Venkata Bhatta naturally had some discussions together. Nearly every evening they would sit and for some time discuss Hari Katha. There's a celebrated exchange, which I'm going to narrate, found in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which most of you are familiar with. In the exchange, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asking, the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, is celebrated as being superlatively chaste. So could you explain to me why she was very anxious to leave the side of Narayana and go to where Krishna was performing his Rasa Leela dance and join the Rasa Leela dance? And Venkata Bhatta replied, there's no lack of chastity on her part because Lord Narayan and Krishna, they're the same. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, very well, they're the same, but why is it that she couldn't enter the Rasa Leela dance? So the chastity question is no longer on the table. It's why was she not allowed to enter the Rasa Leela dance if they're the same? And not only that, according to scripture, she underwent austerities for hundreds and hundreds of years. The goddess of fortune underwent austerities for a long, long time. But she's the goddess of fortune, and Narayan and Krishna are the same. But she wasn't allowed to enter the rasa dance. Why is that? And Venkata Bhatta said, I don't know, but I think you know. So can you explain? And the explanation is that Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, was thinking of herself as Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. And the mood of the residents of Vrindavan, the gopis, when taking part in rasa dance, is as intimate associates of Krishna. In Madhurya Ras, where there isn't an awe and veneration regard, he's their beloved. And thus, the qualification for entering the rasa dance is to have that mood, which is not her mood. So there's sameness and there's distinction. The sameness is the personality of Godhead is the same. The distinction is there's something unique that even the goddess of fortune doesn't qualify for because she's thinking of herself as the goddess of fortune. And that's this mood of madhurya, or intimacy that eclipses majesty. That's the mood of Vrindavan. And so at the end of the discussion, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu backed up and said, but anyway, they're the same and everything's nice. But Venkata Bhatta was a very elevated Vaishnava, and in Lord Chaitanya's association, he could understand the message. And he, Venkata Bhatta, became a great lover of Lord Chaitanya. And it was part of my experience when visiting in Srirangam and visiting with Parashara, but it has been successfully passed on generation after generation to the present generation, that he had topmost regard for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the personality of Godhead. There wasn't he didn't have an idea, others may, but he didn't have the idea that he was an elevated sannyasi or a saint or something. He's the personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. It was very clear. Naturally, in course of time, Venkata Bhatta became very attached, that he's not just worshipping Shiranganath in the temple, he's having the personality of Godhead in his most elevated form in his home. And Venkata Bhatta had a brother, Prabodhananda Saraswati, and because it's not the etiquette that a father will give Diksha to his son, therefore Prabodha later, after Lord Chaitanya left, Prabodhananda Saraswati gave Diksha to Gopal. And Gopal, being young, affectionate, spiritually elevated personality, he was very attached to Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya became very attached to him. Very natural kind of affection exchange between the two. And he would sit with him regularly and hear his teachings and do whatever little service he could do, little Gopal. And his stay was only for 4 months. I mean, it's a long time. Then he stayed in many other places, but it was 4 months. And when it came close to the time for him to leave, Gopal was anticipating the rainy season is going to end and he's going to leave. So he was in some transcendental anxiety. There's several biographical descriptions of this, but he saw Lord Chaitanya as the personality of Godhead. He didn't like to see him as a sannyasi engaged in austerities, etc. There are others of Lord Chaitanya's associates that were like that, but their moods were different, but he didn't like that. But, obviously, what can he do? Because that's his pastime. He had a dream, it said. And in his dream, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda appeared in his dream. And Lord Chaitanya showed his pastime as a householder, because that was more pleasing to him, to Gopal. And he showed him the range of his pastimes. The Jiva Goswami heard from Nityananda about his pastimes and saw the places, and Gopal in his dream is seeing the places and the pastimes. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with his Nimai Pandit, with his long hair, etc., etc. And then he changed back to a sannyasi and Lord Nityananda. And his dream broke. So immediately, Gopal went running to Lord Chaitanya and was weeping and weeping. Please don't leave. Or take me with you if you have to leave. And Lord Chaitanya, there was such affection. He just embraced him. And he was unable to take. He said, he'll hear it shortly, Venkata Bhatta fainted when it was actually the time for Lord Chaitanya to leave. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was parting instructions to Gopal when it was time to leave. For now, stay here and serve your father and mother. After they have departed this world, you may go to Vrindavan and join Rupa and Sanatan. Always engage yourself in hearing and chanting the glories of Krishna. And that was it. Their interaction was those 4 months, and other than those 4 months, there was no further personal association, but there was a long-standing relationship. We'll hear as we go along. And Lord Chaitanya left. So he is 7 to 10 years old. We'll see shortly. He lived in Srirangam for around 30 years total, after which time he went to Vrindavan. He was very clear what Lord Chaitanya's instructions were, and that was embedded in his heart, and he was very attached. And so he followed. He received Diksha from Prabodhananda Saraswati, and his uncle taught him very carefully on all aspects of Brahminical and Vaishnava life, on the Sanskrit grammar and the study of the scripture, the process of deity worship, and everything. And even when he was young, he was such a learned Vaishnav that he became a celebrated person even before he left Srirangam, locally at least. And here in there's a temple where Lord Chaitanya, while he was in those 4 months of the rainy season, he, with his own hand, he carved Jagannath deities. I don't have a photo of those deities. They're very different and beautiful. But on the ceiling, there's this painting of little Gopal sitting before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu receiving his teachings. And so he remained 30 years in Srirangam and then 45 years in Sri Vrindavan. So, ripe age, 75. When his parents departed this world, he was very clear what Lord Chaitanya's teaching was. Lord Chaitanya was still in Puri at the time, but he didn't make a little stop in Puri. He went straight to Vrindavan, took shelter of Rupa and Sanatan. And they knew, Rupa and Sanatan knew that he was going to come at some point in time, and they were very happy. They treated him like a younger brother. He was like their son in age, but they treated him like a younger brother. And they sent a letter to Lord Chaitanya with the good news, because apparently there had been some, did Gopal get there yet, kind of question, because there was some exchange. So they sent him the good news that Gopal has arrived. And Lord Chaitanya was very happy. And he sent another letter along with some paraphernalia, some of his personal items. One was a little wooden platform that's very common for South Indian people to sit on, about 10 inches wide and 6-7 inches tall, hardwood. There's a name for it. And some of his kopins, his clothing, personal clothing, and sent it with a messenger with an instruction for Gopal. Do not become dependent upon security or adopt a permanent residence. Please spend most of your time assisting Rupa and Sanatan in compiling transcendental literature, and thoroughly study this literature as well. Pretty simple, but it's a lifetime assignment. And so, along with the earlier instruction, this was his instruction, and this is what he did. His involvement in the writings of Rupa and Sanatan is very important, because again, he was already appreciated as being very, very learned person, and he had, deep roots in Sri Vaishnava tradition, naturally, because that's where he grew up. And he also had very clear and profound appreciation for Lord Chaitanya's teachings, especially these teachings of the special significance of Vrindavan, the special significance of the mood of love in Vrindavan, the special significance of the position of Srimati Radharani. And he had both. Just one example, many examples. Now, there's different versions. One of the versions that I heard from early on, and there's different versions I've heard subsequently, his role in Jiva Goswami Sandarbhas. Now, one version is he just wrote an introduction or foreword to that book and was a consultant. Another version, which I favor, is when he was growing up and doing his scholarship in Srirangam, he was studying Srimad-Bhagavatam. He carefully went through Srimad-Bhagavatam, making very careful notes, like some people are really good at making very careful notes. And he put these notes in a certain order, and he gave all those notes to Jiva Goswami with two requests: put it in a publishable form and don't mention my name. Because that was his mood. He liked serving unobserved. But he liked serving unobserved, in the background, unobserved, not in the foreground. So Jiva Goswami, in his introductory verses, speaks of one learned Bhatta. He doesn't say Gopal, but one learned Bhatta gave to this insignificant Jiva, Jivakaha, the mandate to write this book. So he doesn't say explicitly he gave me his notes, but that's the version that I've heard. And Gopal wrote an introduction to this book. It's just a very meticulous way of looking at the Srimad-Bhagavatam. A and B. A is according to topics, and B is as a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. It's not a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, but it is a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. It's not called a commentary because Jiva Goswami would not transgress what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. There's no need for a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. There already is one, Srimad-Bhagavatam. But I'm not that kind of scholar that knows enough about this, but I've heard those that are say that the methodology, this is now a carryover from yesterday, but the methodology in the beginning of the early part of Tattva Sandarbha, which is the first of the six, Jiva Goswami does what scholars do. He knew what scholars do, and he did what scholars do. You state your purpose. You describe the primary references you're going to use to establish your purpose, the secondary references that you'll also make, and then the system that you're going to use. So the system was, he would make a declaratory statement, and then he would refer to verse or verses from the Bhagavatam that would support that declaratory statement, and then he would draw upon the secondary yet important sources that support the statement. And then he would mention, if required, the opposing view. Those who would disagree with this would say such and such, and to that my refutation is whatever it is. And to this refutation they would object and say such and such, and my reply will be whatever it is. And that was the system that he used. So the declaratory statements that and then are followed by the other stages are not verbatim, but they very closely follow Vedanta Sutra. So it's a commentary on Vedanta Sutra without being a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, because you don't need one because there already is one. Srimad-Bhagavatam. He didn't transgress Lord Chaitanya's statement, but he made a commentary in that fashion, in that form, because Srimad-Bhagavatam is a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Are you with me? Srimad-Bhagavatam is a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra summarizes the whole of the Vedas, and Srimad-Bhagavatam is the commentary. So writing a commentary on Srimad-Bhagavatam is like writing a commentary on Vedanta Sutra. So it's a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, but it's a commentary on Srimad-Bhagavatam. But it follows the system of Vedanta Sutra, because Srimad-Bhagavatam, being a Purana, isn't confined in that way to making points that lead to other points that lead to other points. It does explain those points. In any case, Gopal Bhatta had a significant role to play in assisting Rupa in the Sandarbhas. It is said that he had a significant role in assisting Sanatana Goswami in compiling one of Sanatana Goswami's important works, which is Hari Bhakti Vilas. And there's two versions. The version that I like is, an example in Paramatma Sandarbha, because there's 6 Sandarbhas, one of them is Paramatma Sandarbha. One of the sections in Paramatma Sandarbha is giving details about the Jiva and the distinction between the Jiva and Paramatma. So in defining the tattva about the Jiva, Jiva Goswami explicitly makes reference to a Acharya of his time that from the Sri Vaishnava tradition that made certain writings about the tattva of the Jiva. His name was Jamitri Muni. Jamitri Muni. Now, I've not heard his name before, but I, subsequently from hearing discussions on Paramatma Sandarbha, did a little research, and he was a very prominent and a well-accepted authority in Sri Vaishnava tradition, living in Srirangam. So there his name appears in Paramatma Sandarbha. Now, what was Gopal Bhatta's role in his name appearing in Paramatma Sandarbha? Was it just upon advice, or was it from his notes that then became Jiva Goswami's composition? Certainly, Gopal Bhatta had his influence. And I feel very comfortable with the understanding that Gopal, it was his notes, which were then refined and, put together in a publishable form by Jiva Goswami. And similarly in Hari Bhakti Vilas, because it's a manual on deity worship, and many, 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 many of the details are the same as Sri Vaishnava details. And mantras to be used when worshipping deity, and procedures and mudras and everything. There's it's Gaudiya mood, and there's scholars that understand all three of these, the Madhvacharya's teachings, Sri Vaishnava teachings, and Lord Chaitanya's teachings. Lord Chaitanya's teachings more closely resemble Sri Vaishnava teachings than Madhva's teachings. Now, they're all Vaishnava teachings, but there's a particular emphasis, of course, that it makes Gaudiya teachings very unique and special. It's the emphasis on Srimad-Bhagavatam, and within the emphasis upon Srimad-Bhagavatam, the relationship of the gopis with Krishna, and how all of that fits together. Because there isn't the same emphasis, for sure, in Madhva's line, or Madhva's teaching specifically, nor is it there in Sri Vaishnava teaching. This is a little extra. I mean, we're speaking about Gopal Bhatta's life, but he had a very, very prominent role in shaping the writings of Rupa and Sanatan. He was requested to do that, and he did that. He's in the background. His name is not in the foreground, but he's in the background with his fingerprints are all over the place in the writings of Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. When Lord Chaitanya left this world, it was very difficult for everybody, and very difficult for Gopal. He had a dream. In his dream, Lord Chaitanya appeared and requested or suggested or instructed Gopal to, if you want my darshan, then make a trip to Nepal. Now, what's Nepal going to do for you to have darshan of Lord Chaitanya? He hadn't been there, but he went there because that was the instruction in his dream. When he went to Nepal, naturally he went to the river where the Gandaki River, where there's Shalagram Shilas, which he was very familiar with worshipping. And again, there's two versions. And, when he went to take, he had a pot to do his bathing. And one version says when he was bathing, another version says he received 6 Shalagram Shilas, went back to Vrindavan, felt not qualified, so he went to take them back to the Gandaki River, and when he tried to place them back in the Gandaki River, they jumped back in his pot. And it happened 3 times. Another version said it was his first visit, not that he went back to Vrindavan, or back to, So in either case, the Shilas were, he understood they want to be worshipped by me. And so he began to worshipping 12 Shalagram Shilas. And now the indication was that, look, you will see me. Go to Nepal and you'll see me. He hasn't seen him yet, but he's doing something that he's quite familiar with, and that's worshipping Shalagram Shilas, because he did it since childhood, part of his practice in his life. 8 years after Lord Chaitanya's departure from this world, Gopal had a very amazing experience. When he was worshipping his Shilas, he suddenly had this desire to have a deity of Krishna, like Rupa and Sanatan had, where he could dress and decorate and provide ornaments and so forth for his deity, because you don't have all that same facility with Shalagram Shilas. He just had a desire, and then the desire was fulfilled. The desire was fulfilled by a wealthy merchant came to Vrindavan and gave gifts to the Goswamis for their deities. And when he gave to Gopal nice ornaments and nice decorations and nice clothing or cloth to make nice garments, he had to decline, because I don't have a deity like they have. But the man was insisting, and so he accepted. And he took rest one night thinking, it would be very nice if I had a deity I can use these items for worship. And he put his deities, the Shilas, in a basket, as he was accustomed to doing, and took rest. And in the morning he went, before the sun came up, as was his practice, took his bath in the river Jamuna. And when he came back, he was ready to do his worship, and he reached in the basket where the Shilas were, but one was missing. And the one that was missing was a Damodar Shila, and then he saw over to the side, there was his Damodar Shila in the form of Radharaman, a self-manifesting, very dapper deity. Look at how cool he's dressed. Look at his turban. And this event was one day after Nrsimha Chaturdasi on Vaishakha Purnima, and he was astonished. Obviously, he paid obeisances again and again. He quickly informed Rupa and Sanatan what happened. They came, they saw, they were astonished. There's many things that are said about what they said, including, this deity is exactly as Krishna looks. this deity is from the waist down, this deity is the mid section of Krishna, this deity is the face of Krishna. But Radharaman is the deity that is the closest to the actual form of Krishna. And so there's two versions. They gave the name, Gopal was happy with the name. The other was he gave the name, they were happy with the name. But Radharaman became the name of the deity. And as time passed, one young brahmachari, a Vaishnav Brahmin, came just as Gopal Bhatta Goswami was completing his deity worship. He had to wait because he was still doing his worship. And when he was done with his worship, he attended to the young man who came. And he asked the young man who came, "Who are you?" And he said, "My name is Gopinath." And, "Well, I don't know you." He said, "Oh, yes, you do. You don't remember, maybe, but long ago you were visiting in Haridwar in a town named Saharanapura, and there was a big storm, and you took shelter in my father's home, and you had exchange with my father all night long. You had a very nice exchange with one another. In the morning he made a request, 'Please give your blessings that I may have a son.' And you gave your blessings, and my father said, 'The firstborn son I'll send to you, and he can assist you in your service.' And that's me. I'm that son. My name is Gopinath." And so Gopal Bhatta accepted. Gopinath became a disciple, known in Vrindavan town as Gopinath Pujari, because he did the deity worship. And Gopinath Pujari's brother later also came, younger brother, his name was Damodar, and Damodar became Gopal Bhatta's disciple, and he became married, whereas Gopinath was a lifelong brahmachari. And his brother, in marriage, his descendants became the Goswamis of Vrndavan. And they have their residences there, and they have a lot of affection, obviously, naturally, for Radharaman. It's very easy to become attached to Radharaman. Here's some nice photos. You can see the details, his smile. There's even, he has little fingernails, and very exquisite deity, and very much loved naturally by Gopal Bhatta himself. Now there's one biography that says there were some, in modern times, don't know when, there were some scientists that were doubtful about the story of the self-manifesting deity. So the scientists received the permission of the pujaris, and under their supervision, they examined the deity, and they couldn't find any evidence of carving of the deity. And I've not seen, but I know some devotees that have personally seen, the backside of the deity has the bulge from which the deity appeared. And self-manifesting Radharaman. We don't see him with a flute in his hand. We see him with the flute across his arms like this, because there's apparently no space for the flute to go in his hands. But that's his liking. He was self-manifesting. We don't ask him why you didn't leave space in your hands. So there's his flute. And now notice by his left side, or our right side, there's a little crown. That's Radharani, because Shalagram Shilas don't require to be installed. The Shila is already Krishna or Narayana. And there's not a Radharani within, but there is the Radharani by his side with a nice canopy above, and it's just a crown seated on a throne, as you see. And, he's, Padmanabha Goswami, the current Goswami, traveled around the USA and had a very elaborate photography exhibit, like kind of like what we're doing, but it was different technology at that time, and showing the different festivals they have. Practically every day in the calendar year, there's some festival or another that's every year done in a certain way. And they have a big place where they keep all their paraphernalia for the deity. Sometimes he rides elephants, and sometimes he does all kinds of things. I mean, not a real elephant in the little temple room, but, this is a summer outfit, obviously. And, he's a very well-dressed deity and very photographic deity. And very much loved by the residents of Vrindavan. A close-up of his features. Now, it's said sometimes Gopal Bhatta started to feel some anxiety that I'm worshipping Krishna, but I'm not worshipping Lord Chaitanya. Because he had deep attachment for Lord Chaitanya. And so, Hare Krishna. So he didn't know what to do, He had a dream. Lord Chaitanya revealed his form to him. Becoming subservient to the love of Gopal Bhatta, Sri Radharaman would sometimes accept the form of Sri Gaurasundara. Now, very mystical, very magical, very wonderful deity. In addition to staying in Vrindavan town, the place that was assigned to him to stay by Rupa and Sanatan was a little remote. It's by one of the Rasa Sthali areas, Nidhivan, and still there, the big wall, and just inside is trees, and a place where Radha and Krishna would perform their rasa dance. This is the temple, Radharaman temple, at Radhakund. And inside that little compound area is where the deity is. Interesting, the deity inside is Revati Balaram. And on our right side, or their deity's left, and there's little Radharaman, and there's Radharani by his side. Celebrated disciple, Srinivas Acharya. The books that he wrote they're very clearly the ones that he wrote. Sat Kriya Sara Dipika. It's a book that gives details and lots of details on worship. Like a little while ago, I attended a function where someone was performing an initiation ceremony that took 1.5 million hours because he was following Sat Kriya Sara Dipika. Details. But, he was into it, and some people like all those details. He edited Hari Bhakti Vilas, at least, if not compiled its essence. He wrote a foreword to the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami, and he made a commentary on Krishna Karnamrita, which is a book by Bilva Mangala Thakur. It's a book that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu really liked, because Bilvamangala Thakur was prior to Lord Chaitanya's life, knowing that Gopal Bhatta wrote a commentary. And it's a long writing, long text, and I haven't read his commentary, but I'm sure it's very wonderful. And another outstanding quality of his, which kind of indicated already, but it's profound humility. And he requested, we already heard, he requested Jiva Goswami not to include his name in the Sandarbhas. He requested Sanatan Goswami to not include his name in Hari Bhakti Vilas. He requested Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami to not include his name in Chaitanya Charitamrita, because, as you know, Krishnadas Kaviraj was not very elderly and very learned, and was not feeling qualified to write a biography on Lord Chaitanya's life. So he went from person to person, the elder senior persons in Vrindavan, seeking their blessings. And when he went to Gopal, he said, sure, my blessings on one condition. Don't include my name. So he didn't. His name is not even indirectly mentioned. And but what we do know about him is primarily from a book that was written later, Bhakti Ratnakar. We've heard that title many times. So from Bhakti Ratnakar, we find out things about his life, because he was a very private or humble person that didn't want to talk about himself or have others talk about himself. And this is the final slide. This is the Samadhi Mandir of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. His Samadhi Mandir is by the side of the Radharaman temple. It's the Radharaman temple itself is in a quiet area of Vrindavan, and his Samadhi is in a quiet section around that quiet temple, but very revered during his time and after his time, and celebrated personality amongst the followers of Lord Chaitanya. So that's our discussion on Gopal Bhatta Goswami. It's a little short. The other ones were a little longer. And Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, which is our final evening together, will be even shorter. So we'll spend some time tomorrow evening covering some sections from Sad Goswami Astaka by Srinivas Acharya, who was one of the disciples of Gopal Bhatta. Gopal Bhatta didn't have many disciples, at least we're not informed about them. At least we know of three. And that's Gopinath Pujari, his brother Damodar Das, and Srinivas Acharya. But he was in the background, being the ballast of the six Goswamis, the superlative authority on deity worship. But even at that, I mean, those of you who have been to Radharaman Temple, the temple area is quite small. The temple room is quite small. The altar is quite small. And, one would think that he would be the authority on deity worship, but when there's so many deities at Jiva Goswami's altar at the Radha Damodar temple, because the altar is bigger, and he was also very authoritative in the matter of deity worship. And they were about the same age, because they were the younger generation. Jiva Goswami and Gopal Bhatta Goswami were like sons of age, but Gopal Bhatta was treated like a brother, and Jiva Goswami was treated like a disciple. And their moods are different, and that's natural. His descendant, just a little bit. The Goswamis of Radharaman had a very prominent role during Prabhupada's life. The primary, the elder amongst them was Vishvambar Goswami. Vishvambar Goswami had a relationship with the Goswami at the Radha temple. He, Vishvambar, arranged with him for a room for Prabhupada. Vishvambar Goswami was the one who was turned to by Prabhupada to install Krishna Balaram and Radha Shyama because everyone looked up to him. And if he did it, they wouldn't criticize. If somebody else did it, so he did it. He accepted that responsibility, and he engaged all the other Goswamis, so they couldn't criticize. Not only for that reason, but they were involved, and he was the one overseeing. And he had a very high regard for Prabhupada, very profound affection. And similarly, he's now deceased, but his son has similar profound appreciation because he was a young boy when growing up when his father was interacting with Prabhupada, so he knew firsthand. Padmanabha Goswami. So that's a little inside appreciation how that connects even with our ISKCON society. So let's see if there's some discussion on the Gopal Bhatta topic.
I have a question. So Gopal Bhatta Goswami, you said, grew up in Sri Vaishnava culture in the early years of his life, and he got his Diksha and everything through that sampradaya.
Yes, he did.
So then he was able to receive the teachings from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Is there any significance as to why he was born in a South Indian Sri Vaishnava family? Is it to show like the teachings are similar? Or is there any significance?
Well, yes and no. I mean, his uncle from whom he received Diksha was Prabodhananda Saraswati, and Prabodhananda Saraswati moved to Vrindavan, and he stayed, his Bhajan Kutir was near, right in the backside of the Kaliyagat, and he was a he was a very prolific writer, and unassuming, he made no pretenses about his glorification of Lord Chaitanya. Chaitanya Chandramrita and Vrindavan Mahimamrita, just like really long Sanskrit verses that are very, very beautiful and poetic. Now, your question is, was there significance in his taking birth in that place? Well, Rupa and Sanatan came from a family also from South India. Or at least the roots, their ancestry is from South India. And, in South Indian Vaishnavism has a reputation of being very strong and very strict to teachings. So that may be a reason to add that dimension or flavor or credibility or sense of identification. But on the other hand, it doesn't so much matter. On the other hand, it doesn't so much matter, just like Raghunath Das Goswami was from not at all from a Brahmin family. Or Haridas Thakur, right? Not even from a Vaishnava family. So there can be some significance or not. You can make it, have some thoughts and make some argument on either side. It added substance and credibility for people from that part of the world. And then and the substantiality to the teachings. He added that from his upbringing. And he had a very important role to play in the writings that were putting in a written form Lord Chaitanya's teachings, which were in a written form by him, but by his followers. So one could say yes, and one could say not really. Yes.
Hey Krishna Guru Maharaj. Since Gopal Bhatta Goswami was initiated in the Sri Vaishnava line, if somebody has Diksha, I think it is very common in like Pushti Marg that they have Diksha early. So would it be appropriate for those devotees to accept Diksha in the Gaudiya line again?
Again? Well, this is detail. A short answer is no. And another answer is Diksha. This is a discussion I had with Gaurakeshava. Gaurakeshava is a disciple of Prabhupada. And half the year he spends in Hawaii, the other half of the year he spends in Srirangam. And he's very learned. He's like super learned. He's the most learned person in the details of deity worship in ISKCON. So I went to him with this question. And his point was, if one receives such and such mantra, that doesn't preclude receiving another mantra or another mantra or another mantra, because Diksha is per mantra, not per anything, not just Diksha and that's it. Now that's his, it's a rule. On the other hand, it's a more common practice that I'm aware of, that persons accept Lord Chaitanya, as did Prabodhananda Saraswati, and they accept Lord Chaitanya as their worshipable Ishtadev, and he may chant his mantras as he chanted from the time he received them. But his heart, his life, his everything, his all in all, was invested in Lord Chaitanya. So, in short, there's different schools, as with many things, and more common is, as far as etiquette-wise. Ooh.
He's triggered. He doesn't hear slow, so put very high.
But it's a bebop sound too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are many persons who it gets detailed, and it's a little delicate. So a lot depends upon the details of what happened and what was their understanding of what happened and what mantras they received and all of those things. It's for sure one is not to receive mantras again from different places. But different mantras may be received. That's a rule. That's a Gaurakeshava rule. Anyway, that's Gaurakeshava's reference, because he took me through Hari Bhakti Vilas. He provided me a digital version of Hari Bhakti Vilas, translated in English by Bhumipati Prabhu. And it's not published, it's just a digital version. He took me through where this topic is discussed in Hari Bhakti Vilas. And so it's not gray, but it's detailed. And it's a little delicate. So that depends on the details.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So when you are explaining about Gopal Bhatta Goswami's humility not to include his name
Speak slowly.
Not to include his name in the writings of
Yes.
all acharyas. I
Yes.
was really attracted by his humility. My question is the follow-up of Rishta's. So when maybe I may not have captured if, when you are explaining it, just for the clarification, is so when they get first initiated in Sri Vaishnava, they will be chanting the mantra. What they receive is different from what the mantra that we receive, right, Maharaj? So in that case,
wait. You got a presupposition I don't know is correct. Say it again slowly.
So when Gopal Bhatta Goswami got initiated in Sri Vaishnava,
He didn't get initiated in Sri Vaishnava. He was initiated by Prabodhananda Saraswati, who was a Sri Vaishnava. Just correcting your language.
okay. So the mantra,
I don't know what the mantra was.
okay. So my question is like usually whatever the mantra they receive, like we would be chanting it for our lifetime.
Yes.
So
Did Gopal
If
Bhatta
Gop-
continue chanting for his lifetime? Of course.
okay, still Chaitanya Mahaprabhu line, my thing is like Gopal Bhatta Goswami was writing books, scriptures, everything like for Gaudiya Vaishnava.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that was his heart.
Okay.
That was his heart. He knew both.
Okay.
And his heart was in Lord Chaitanya's line. The formality was in the Sri Vaishnava mantras.
Okay.
His heart was in Lord Chaitanya's line. And he knew both.
Okay. And then another question is, you said Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan Goswamis, they knew that Gopal Bhatta Goswami is going to come.
Yes, they did.
So is that like they received the information from Mahaprabhu,
Of course.
or
Yes.
what mode of communication was there during
Letters.
that? Oh. Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Before there was postal system, there was letters. Brahmanas carried, or messengers carried letters. They wrote and they sent with a messenger. Mahaprabhu wrote back. We knew that from when they were living in Ramakeli. They sent messengers.
Oh, messenger. Okay. Sure.
And then they weren't getting reply, and then Lord Chaitanya gave a reply.
Yes.
That was the system.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, I have a couple of questions about Shaligram Shila, if that's appropriate.
Okay.
So one is, like I heard that Shaligram Shila is a Mahavishnu avatar. Is that correct?
It depends on who you are.
Okay.
The answer to that question.
Okay.
Common is Shalagram is Narayana. Shalagram is Narayana. And those in ISKCON, Shalagram, Prabhupada writes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, their temples at that time didn't yet have, but they will one day have. And when Shalagram is taken off the altar on the appearance days of any of the Vishnu Tattva forms, he's worshipped according to that Vishnu form. Nrsimha Chaturdasi, he's brought off the altar, and Abhishek, and he's worshipped as Lord Nrsimhadev, because Narayan is the source Vishnu is the source of all the avatars.
Second is there any significance why Shaligram Shilas are only in Gandaki river, not anywhere else?
Yeah, there probably is.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. And third is, I don't know if my information is correct, but we don't decorate Shaligram Shilas.
Why do you say we don't decorate?
I heard, that's why I say maybe it's wrong information.
Well, what do you mean by we don't decorate? We give him eyes, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, sometimes they don't. They just give him sandalwood paste and tulsi.
No, maybe information is wrong. I heard you decorate Govardhan Shila, but not Shaligram Shila, but source is not right.
Well, for sure. Tulsi and sandalwood. Now, other forms of decoration, I'm thinking, and about, because this is not a field that I spend much time with, and I'm thinking about those that are very involved in Shaligram worship, and come to think of it, Tulsi and sandalwood, and that's it. So you maybe your information is right, but I'll double check. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm just looking over here.
Sure. Thank you for having this class, Maharaj. And I would like to relate. It's not a question, but I want to relate something. 2 years back, I think, we had the replica of Vrindavan temples in New Jersey temple, and we had Radha Raman over there in the replica temple in the New Jersey temple.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, so that's when I came to know about Gopal Bhatta Goswami and Radha Raman. And today, fortunately, you shared the same thing. So I'm very happy, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I have two questions, Guru Maharaj. One is a clarification. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he met Gopal Bhatta Goswami in the South Indian Yatra, has he already visited Ramakeli and met Rupa and Sanatan by that time? Or
Yes.
Yes, okay. Just curious because he mentioned about Rupa and Sanatan to Gopal Bhatta, so I was not sure whether it happened before or after. The next question, Maharaj, about Srinivas Acharya. We don't hear too much about Srinivas Acharya and how he took, or at least I have not heard how he took Gopal Bhatta as his guru. On the other hand, we hear about Narottam Das Thakur and his spiritual master, stories about that. Do you know anything about Srinivas Acharya's taking...
I spent a lot of time preparing for the visit to Radhakund and Shamakund, and one of the personalities that was discussed was Srinivas Acharya, and there's not a lot of biographical information about how he became a disciple, other than he became his disciple. If that's what you're looking for, I don't, I'm unaware of where there's a reference that gives that kind of detail.
Thank you.
Do you have any? Can you make a comment on the? Keep the microphone. On Shalagram Shilas being worshipped with anything other than Tulsi and sandalwood. What's your understanding?
In my house, my mom never decorates the Shaligram Shila. We have the Shaligram Shila, but we never decorate the Shaligram Shila.
Okay, aside from what your mom did, do you know anything beyond what your mom did?
What is it?
Are you aware of the principle besides what mom did?
No, Maharaj.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay. Now you have a comment or question or what?
Yeah, I have a question. So, this is puzzling for me. So, Gopal Bhatta Goswami went from Sri Sampradaya to Gaudiya Sampradaya and did all this stuff, and he was so involved in worship of Radharani. Like, why, after seeing that, a person from that Sampradaya went and worshipped Radharani, why Sri Sampradaya people are not accepting Radharani? That is puzzling for me.
Oh, why is it puzzling? I mean, they have their mood. My understanding, with Venkata Bhatta and his brother or uncle of Gopal was Prabodhananda Saraswati. He wanted to go too, but he's the chief priest. He couldn't go. He had his duty. And there are those that don't have that association. Although Gopal, this and that, and Prabodhananda Saraswati, this and that, they have their mood and their understanding of based upon scripture of all those things. And so
Okay.
they're content in their mood and their teachings.
The other question is like, I think you mentioned, I don't know whether I'm paraphrasing it correctly. So when you said Lakshmi went and did austerity for hundreds of years to
Get entrance
engage in the
into rasa
pastimes,
dance.
engage in the pastimes. So when you said the discussion between Venkata Bhatta and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was happening, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Venkata Bhatta that she is not aware of how she has to act.
No, I didn't say that.
So can you
I didn't say that.
repeat that part?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Her mood is she's the goddess of fortune. And Narayan is her consort. And she was attracted, but it's her mood, you don't participate in Braja pastimes, Rasalila or in any of them, without the mood of the Brijbasis. She has no question of her purity, there's no question of her fidelity, there's no question of her chastity, it's just a different mood. The Aishvarya mood is not the same as the Braja mood, the Madhurya mood of Braja. And you can't enter into Braja without that mood of love. And question, how does one get that mood? Answer, by association with those who have that mood. And that's the teaching of Lord Chaitanya, it's the writing of Rupa Goswami. That's how one is to get that mood, through the association with such personalities. The Ragatmika Bhaktas, Raga for the Ragatmika Bhaktas, like them. And then one can have entrance into those pastimes. By that you receive mercy from them. So it's not a matter of anything else. Purity, qualification. Okay. Go ahead.
So Maharaj, following up on the same Lakshmi mood. So
This question?
No, same like the
Same
mood
question?
of Lakshmi, that she's not able to enter the rasa dance.
Yes.
So she has intense desire, and then she did the austerity for hundreds and thousands of years. So is that like while doing austerity also to enter, her mood was still
Yes.
Aishwarya mood?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right.
even though she's in that,
She's goddess of fortune.
yeah, and she has to pass
It's a mood. Vaishvarya mood and Madhurya mood are not the same. And Vraja is Madhurya mood. So how does one get Madhurya mood? Not by being the goddess of fortune, or by doing austerities as the goddess of fortune, or anything else. It's the mercy of those associates. And when one receives the mercy of those associates, that's the eligibility. And there's little people like you and me. What about us?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That's what I picked up on. Oh.
That was my question.
So it's the mercy of those associates. That's how. And then there's a method. You have to read carefully Rupa Goswami's writings, and the method is spelled out. And there's a method. Okay? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Last question. Which?
Shalagram Shilas.
Yes.
So in many houses they have lot of Shilas, but they are like small size, like variety size. They are so small.
It's still.
And so it's hard to decorate them. But the Govardhan Shila is like usually big, so it's easy to
You're
decorate
speculating.
Thank
It's
you,
not
Maharaj.
about size, it's about principle.
Principles, yeah, but I don't know about that. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have anything online? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.